Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Alex and today I'm going to introduce to you the first series that I'll be doing on this channel. I'm beginning with one of my strongest hyperfixations, the Vampire Chronicles, by which I mean the entire franchise, I suppose to be the word. The books, the movies, yes, even 2002's Queen of the Damned, and AMC's television show. I'm obsessed, and chalk it up to my evangelical upbringing if you like, but I have to do my part to make sure other people are at least as fixated as I am. Therefore, I'll be doing a piece-by-piece analysis of Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles and its adaptations, a tale of love, obsession, cruelty, and forgiveness, a glimpse into the author's decades-long reckoning with faith, philosophy, science, loss, and gender, an enduring memorial to several lives, a saga that is now informing itself. I'm a recent fan of the world that Anne Rice crafted from 1976's Interview with a Vampire to 2018's Blood Communion. I only got into it because AMC's adaptation looked too intriguing and alluring to ignore, and because I'm an equally devout fan of NBC's Hannibal. I knew Brian Fuller had been inspired by Interview with a Vampire, specifically the unholy family of Louis de Pointe-Dulac, Lestat de Liancourt, and Claudia, when he wrote the shifting and tragic dynamic between Will Graham, Hannibal Lecter, and Abigail Hobbs. I wanted to get to know the characters and the story that inspired Fuller to create his own murder family. I can't remember exactly when I became obsessed. It was probably within the first few minutes of the pilot episode. I just knew that this world had a grip on me and wouldn't let me go. I made sure to watch the entire first season, the 1994 film, and read the books before the second season aired so I could watch each episode when it debuted on AMC+. Now, I'll be covering the Vampire Chronicles for my first video series on my channel so that I can share my enjoyment with all of you. So, what is the Vampire Chronicles? The Vampire Chronicles is a book series written by Anne Rice from 1976's Interview with a Vampire to 2018's Blood Communion. There are a total of 13 books, including some crossovers with her Lives of the Mayfair Witches series, and 2 standalone novels. Fans are very divided about how many books and which ones they'll acknowledge as canon, and Anne herself had complicated feelings about some of her installments. In 1994, a film adaptation of Interview with a Vampire was released, a mostly accurate version of the book tasked with condensing decades of story into a 1990s theatrical runtime and staying true to the relationship between Louis and Lestat without pissing off the homophobes. In 2002, The Queen of the Damned was released, supposedly an adaptation of the next 2 books in the series, The Vampire Lestat and The Queen of the Damned. The movie was only produced to postpone the return of the film rights to Anne Rice, despite the fact that the studio hadn't done anything with the IP since the first movie. Anne Rice finally got the film rights back in 2016 after Universal Pictures failed to produce a new film series, and AMC acquired the rights from Anne on May 13th, 2020. Production on a television adaptation began, and the first season of Interview with a Vampire aired in 2022, covering the first half of the novel. The second half of the novel was covered by Season 2, which aired in 2024. The third season, rebranded as The Vampire Lestat, and subsequently raising questions about if each season will be named after the book it's based on, is set to air sometime in the summer of this year. It will be the first time that particular book will be adapted in earnest. There is also a graphic novel adapting Interview with a Vampire from Claudia's perspective, which I still need to finish reading and will address eventually. Why it exists. Before I get into why I love this story and why you should too, as well as how this video series will theoretically work, I think it's important to address why the Vampire Chronicles exists. The inspiration for Anne Rice to sit down and write her first novel, Interview with a Vampire, is baked into that story and all the subsequent books built upon it. The books and their adaptations cannot be divorced from the context in which they came to be. Anne Rice and her husband Stan's first child was born on September 21st, 1966. Michele, nicknamed Mouse, was a cute little girl with curly blonde hair and blue eyes. She was diagnosed with leukemia in 1970 and died on August 5th, 1972. She was 5 years old, not quite 6. In 1973, Anne turned a short story she'd written in the late 60s into Interview with a Vampire, which was then published in 1976. In the story, she describes a couple, Lestat, who was originally supposed to be Lestan after her husband, and Louis, who adopt a cute little girl with curly blonde hair and blue eyes who is 5 years old. They turn her into a vampire, an immortal creature that can, in theory, live forever, never dying, but who can also never age. Claudia will always look like a 5-year-old child, no matter how much her mind and personality develops. Ultimately, toward the end of Louis' narration to a bright young reporter with a point of view, he relates how Claudia did actually die while he could not prevent it. Just as Anne couldn't prevent Michele from dying, Louis couldn't save Claudia. And Louis was the character through which Anne dealt with her own grief. That's why Louis comes and goes in later novels. At some point, she couldn't keep writing from the perspective of the character who most embodied her grief over Michele's death. The Vampire Chronicles exists because of Michele Rice and Anne's struggle to process her death. Michele is immortalized as Claudia. That is the foundation upon which the Vampire Chronicles exists. The death of a little girl with curly blonde hair and blue eyes while her parents couldn't prevent it. Claudia dies in the original novel and in every adaptation of it because Michele did. And much of Louis and Lestat's arcs and subsequent novels stems from that loss. Claudia haunts the narrative somewhat literally, and Michele through her. Why I like it. My reverence for this world comes from my appreciation for its themes, its insights into Anne's own psyche and experiences, her evocative descriptions, and its experimental nature. Reading the Vampire Chronicles, one gets the impression that there wasn't a theme that Anne wasn't willing to address, although how well she addressed them could be a matter for debate. She talked about faith and religion in terms of personal belief and the institution. There was Nicky, who lost his faith and couldn't cope. Lestat, who never had any faith but wanted to become a priest. Armand, who could cling to traditions he didn't believe in because they gave him a guide for how to live in the world. And Louis, whose Catholic guilt haunted him after becoming a vampire. She talked about science, largely through how different characters believe scientists would react to the evidence of vampires, at least until the last few novels. Every character does something despicable to another character, and yet, by the end of what Anne was able to write, the vampires are able to forgive each other enough to start forming their own society with their own code and customs. Characters wrestle with their sense of self and self-worth, if life has meaning and what it might be, the phantoms of their former selves, and how to live in a world that keeps changing. And, of course, Anne wrote about loss. Each book provides a snapshot of what Anne's mindset was when she wrote it. Lestat, while originally a stand-in for her husband, became a very different character after the first book, morphing into a sort of ideal for Anne herself. Lestat took on the traits she wished she had or wished she had more of. He was a version of herself who could do and say things she felt she couldn't, which is actually similar to how Gabrielle, Lestat's mother, a character that Anne ironically didn't think highly of, thought of him. Therefore, reading Lestat's narration as he considers morality, the nature of goodness in the savage garden, whether God or the devil really exists, and more besides, often feels like reading Anne's own musings. In every book, Anne takes the reader on a journey through time and space, like the doctor grabbing Rose by the hand and telling her to run. She brings to life ruins in such an uncanny way that it almost feels like she lived there when those civilizations were still alive, or like she had a TARDIS hiding somewhere. Russian Kiev, Renaissance Venice, a Celtic forest, ancient Egypt, a tiny village in the I still don't know how to say this right. Avergny? Maybe? The reader sees it all as though she witnessed it herself, even before internet research was possible. Finally, for the books, I like the way the story itself is nebulous, shifting in different ways that seem to reflect changes in Anne's heart and mind, which feels perfect for a gothic horror saga. The tale began in one form, with Interview with a Vampire, but then along came the vampire Lestat, calling the veracity of the original story into question. Different characters narrate their own chapters or even books, which means that readers can see different perspectives on the same event, or another side to a character that a previous narrator may not have known. Anne herself reworked the lore multiple times, adding and changing things here and there, so that the explanation for how vampires came to exist went through different permutations explained by different characters making assumptions or having incomplete information. While I don't agree with every alteration Anne made to the lore, I think that her ideas about aliens and Atlantis would have been better suited for its own science fiction series. I absolutely respect that she had every right, as the author, to go back and revisit and rework ideas as she wanted to. As for the adaptations, I think I'll save explaining why I like them, or don't, for other videos. Series schedule. I have a schedule planned for weekly videos through July in order to cover the first 3 books, the 1994 and 2002 films, and the first 2 seasons. That being said, The Vampire Lestat is ambiguously set to debut sometime in the summer. Will I be done covering the first 2 seasons before then? I don't know. What I do know is that I intend to record live reactions to each episode of the new season, regardless of whether or not I'm finished with my recaps for season 1 and 2. If I'm not finished, then it looks like I will be making more videos at a time. After The Vampire Lestat is finished airing, I'll focus on wrapping up the analysis for previous episodes if I still have more to do, and then work on other videos until the DVD release. Then I'll continue with my analysis covering The Vampire Lestat and theorizing about Season 4, or The Queen of the Damned, or whatever they choose to call it. And that's it for my first installment in my first video series. Follow along with me over the coming months and years as I analyze Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles and their adaptations. I hope you become a fan of her universe and my channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for your support. Bye, everybody.